Good
Good,
evening, everyone.
good evening, everyone out there, Roberta's House fans.
And welcome to another episode of Real Talk Live, which is a series of live and recorded conversations about various aspects of grief. My name is Janaea Stanley. I am a clinical social worker and I am the clinical supervisor at Roberta's House. And we have our illustrious president, Mrs. Annette March Greer, here with us tonight. And we're excited to have a conversation with you about the necessary healing process that grief is. Annette, did you want to say anything before we move
Sure.
on?
Thank you, Janaea. Good evening, everybody. We are so happy that you've decided to join in with us this evening for this very, very important conversation that we're going to have tonight. We're hoping that there will be no interruptions due to the storm. But if there is, we will continue to try to get back on again. So don't go too far. Thank you.
So, we at Roberta's House are very, very busy, and we have so many different things going on. And we just want to tell you about a few of those things. So, this weekend on Saturday is our first Grab Crabs and Go event. So, with the pandemic, we weren't able to have our regular crab feast. And so, we revamped everything to be able to still have an event. And it's a virtual event basically. But you can place your order and you can come pick up your crabs on Saturday and then you can take them back home or, if you want to invite family over and those types of things. So that will be on Saturday. Tickets need to be purchased by Thursday. So please do go to our website, robertashouse.org, to place that order.
Mhm.
Annette, you want to tell them about the Tree of Life?
Yes, so of course, we are moving along with our construction project for the new Roberta's House Center that's to be completed by the end of this year, late November, early December. And this will be the first bereavement center ever constructed or built by an African nonprofit, African American nonprofit. And we're so excited about this, that this is a historical event. And so this is an opportunity for also uh, family, friends, volunteers, anyone from the community. You can purchase a brick, which will be opening back up again soon, in honor or in memory of someone. And we are also selling leaves for our tree of life to have your loved one's name placed on that leaf or a butterfly. So please visit our website. You can see all the information there when you go to give to the capital campaign. And this is an exciting time, and you can visit our website and see how it's progressing. Thank you.
And we're excited. Annette, you were able to tour the building last week.
Yes, yes. So
How
now the
was
walls,
that?
yeah, they're really cool. The walls are going in now, so you can walk in from one room to the next. Um, it is it's amazing. It's you see something on paper and then it becomes real. And it's just amazing how it can all come together, with architects and builders and designs, how it goes from paper to actually, being a physical location. So it's awesome. And I believe that the bricks will be starting next week, the outside bricks of the facility. And so we're still fundraising to complete the center. We're down to the 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 last stretch to complete this project. So we're looking still for more opportunities to complete the rooftop, which will be our outdoor space.
Awesome. What can we do in the outdoor space?
So the outdoor space is going to be open. It has a beautiful view looking over the entire landscape of Baltimore. It will have a open area to do yoga.
Oh,
Um, Yes, it will have a meditation, a glass meditation room up there on the top. That will be sort of like the beacon of light for Roberta's house in the at the nighttime. And then the other side, we're sort of trying to decide if the other side would be best for a labyrinth, which is sort of like a walking trail, or if we should put a child's playground area. So
Oh,
um, we'll have to talk about that more and see what would be the best use. So those are the options, but it's a beautiful site up there. We're also going to have planters for vegetation, for flowering, for and that will be part of our program, helping young people to grow herbs and vegetables and flowers, just to see how we can produce and create beautiful things and healthy food.
that is awesome. Yes, horticulture is a wonderful um, treatment measure or, therapeutic measure. So that's exciting to be able to do that.
Hmm.
That's very exciting.
Hmm.
So again, we just want to welcome you all to our Real Talk Live for tonight. The title is Grieving, a Necessary Healing Process. And so we will begin, let me pull up the agenda. We will begin with talking about Grief Awareness Month. So Roberta's House being a grief support center, a family grief support center, and August 30th being National Grief Awareness Day, we have dedicated the month of August to bringing awareness to all types of grief and the various aspects that touch grief. And so throughout the month, we'll be having different quotes and different real talk conversations that highlight various aspects of grief that are not as well known, because we want to bring more awareness to grief. We are all grieving. We're all grieving something now. The pandemic has definitely brought that to light. It's caused a lot of grief. And so we want to do our part to help those who might be struggling with that. We all can use a little bit of a pick me up, a little bit of encouragement. And we hope to offer some things that will be able to help those who are hurting right now.
Mm.
So that will be the month of August. So we look forward to that. So tonight kicks off Grief Awareness Month. And we will begin our discussion with talking about why grief and mourning are important topics, and why this experience is really important to us.
Hmm. Hmm.
And as I mentioned, it is basically, again, because it's impacting everyone.
Hmm.
Everyone is dealing with some type of grief right now. We've gone through, from the beginning of the year, 2020 has just seemed to just impact the entire world. Losing Kobe Bryant and his daughter and other passengers on the helicopter, traumatic.
Hmm.
And then we're dealing with a pandemic, and then we're dealing with job loss and financial loss and loss of lifestyle and loss of routine. On top of that, people are losing their lives to COVID, and as well as other forms of violence. People are still losing their lives to gun violence and different types of homicide. There's just a lot of grief, a lot
It
of
is.
devastation that we're dealing with. And so we just want to do our part to be an encouragement and offer support.
Mm, absolutely, Janaea. That it's really critical that we address what so many in us are facing today. These are unprecedented times. Even today, talking about a flood that's
Right.
coming through Florida and all the way up to the northeastern coast. People are just inundated with so much that's happening and so much loss around them, and especially due to the pandemic. So, this is an important topic because we are in this together, and it's important that we know how to take care of ourselves as we go through all of these things, that because it's enough stress to really make us sick, to
Mm-hmm.
make an individual sick, or to really harm us if we don't take
Mhm.
care of ourselves emotionally and mentally. So,
Absolutely.
so when we talk about grief, I think it's really important that we understand what grief is. You know, we know it's something that all of us will experience at some point of time, because one, we all have relationships, and there are things that are valuable in our lives that we will lose. And grieving is a part of life, believe it or not. I mean, as early as an infant and growing into childhood, separating from parents, going to school for the first time, and growing old, is even a lost process. Or some people has lost their health. So we all know what it feels like to grieve, but many of us don't quite understand that grieving is a healing process that we must work through. It is a process working through a loss emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And it's a process of, when I say a process, it actually means that it requires us to do a lot of thinking, um, making meaning and understanding out of what we're going through at the time. And it's also something that we have to go through. We can't get around it. We can't avoid it. We can't, and most of us try very hard at
Yes,
this,
we do. We do.
because it's painful sometimes. But it is an experience, a journey that is really about growth in the end. And sometimes we have to go through this pain in order to grow. It means that, we have to change our beliefs, we have to change our values, we have to change our outlook on life. We have to change so many things when we grieve, because the loss brings a lot of awareness to us as to, maybe ideas and beliefs that don't sustain us, or um, help us to move forward. And so grieving is also about adapting and adjusting to that change. Um, and it can create a lot of stress, because most of us don't like change. Change is not an easy thing to accept. I mean, just the fact of this whole pandemic, some of us are kicking, fighting, and screaming, and some people still don't want to wear those face masks, and people are still getting sick. Um, you know, even our leaders are some of our leaders are resisting change. So
Yeah.
yeah, we don't like change, and but it forces us to change. And so grieving is necessary, just like you had a physical wound, and a very deep physical wound, say a cut or something. You would have to seek medical attention,
Mhm.
and you would have to nurture it, you'd have to care for it in order for your body to heal. Well, grief is creates an emotional wound and a spiritual wound that also requires nurturing, requires being patient with yourself, time, all of that. Um, and it's necessary in order for that spiritual and emotional wound to heal as well. And mourning is another word that we oftentimes use with the grieving process. Mourning is that outward expression, and it is the process of letting go. It is the actual active engagement in grieving. And we see mourning today many ways in our communities. Um, we see balloon releases. We see people wearing T-shirts in memory of their loved one. Some people have tattoos in memory of their loved one. Um, we see car stickers and bumpers on people's cars.
Mhm.
rest in peace, or things of that nature. So all of these are signs of mourning.
Mhm.
And it's important that we recognize these signs in each other, because it's an opportunity that, first of all, we're giving people the freedom to express their grief, which is very important in healing. And we're also acknowledging people in their grief and giving them permission to grieve. So mourning is a very important part of the grieving process. When I say it's the process of letting go, I don't um, think of that as letting go of memories or letting go of the person who has died. It's more of letting go of, as I spoke about before, maybe those ideas, beliefs, or things that don't sustain us. And an example of that mourning, letting go, many people feel some regret about the death of someone close. Um, if
Mhm.
I only could have, would have, should have, or if only. And so that's a very normal and natural response and way of thinking about your loss. But it is a thought that can block you from healing if you hang on to that too long. So, guilt has a purpose. It's not meant to destroy us, it's not meant for us to condemn ourselves for life. It's a teacher. And
Mhm.
so we may have to let go of guilt after a certain time period and forgive ourselves or forgive someone else. Um, that's mourning. That's working. That's the work that's required in order to heal. So I know that's a lot, but hopefully that gives you a better understanding of how necessary grieving is. Um, it is a human experience that we're really ultimately supposed to grow from, no matter how painful it is. And what really matters, how we get through that grief, is the support systems that we have
Yes.
in place to help us work through that grief. Support systems that aren't going to judge us, support systems that will be there to listen to us, to be patient with us, and allow us to express our pain and our sorrow, understanding that we have to work through it. Um, so grieving is essential, and
Yeah.
it's about healing
Yeah.
and
And as
growing.
you mentioned, it's like a physical wound. If you were, had a deep wound, a deep cut, you're not going to just let it bleed out everywhere. You're going to take care of it. You're going to pack it. You're going to clean it. That is the grief process. You're going to allow it to scab over.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the grieving process. When we experience a loss, it is a deep wound. So
Absolutely.
that's a great analogy that you gave. And so just as it's important for us to get assistance and address when we have a physical wound, grief is the same way when we have an emotional wound.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And because the entire world is now dealing with grief, we classify it as a communal loss, a communal grief.
Mm-hmm.
We're all experiencing loss at the same time, and it's been various losses, whether it was loss of life due to COVID, or loss of income, or loss of, a job, or the children not being able to go to school. All of those things have created a sense of loss. And so in one way or another, all of us are grieving. All of us are trying to deal with having that loss. We've had
Mm-hmm.
to readjust schedules. At Roberta's house, we've had to redo all of our programming. Everything is now virtual. And it's taken some time. It's taken some time for us just to even think about the fact that we have to do this. Like, this is necessary. We
Mm-hmm.
can't continue to do things like we were doing it before, because we have people that we want to help and that we want to work with. And so now, given some of these limitations, we have to do things differently. So it's definitely taken some time, but the good thing is all of us are going through it. And
Mm-hmm.
so, as you mentioned earlier, having that support system is vital when it comes to being able to grieve in a healthy way. Having a support system, like you said, that's non-judgmental, because sometimes when we express ourselves, it's not cute and pretty. You know, sometimes it can be rather ugly, and the truth can hurt at times. So having a support system that's not going to judge you for how you feel is vital. You want to really express yourself in truth, in its fullness, to help, you know, get it all out. Just like with a wound, you know, you want to clean it all out. You don't want to leave anything left in there. So you want to get it all out.
Mm-hmm. And similarly, if we don't take care of that wound and we neglect it, it becomes infected.
Yes.
And an abscess can form. And that infection can spread throughout the entire body. And so think of your emotional and spiritual wound very similar. If it's avoided, if it's neglected, that pain and that grief can infect the entire body and cause physical illness as well.
Absolutely.
And even lead to more chronic mental illnesses.
Yes. Yes. A lot of people, as a therapist, as a clinical social worker, I've seen a lot of clients who have developed a mental health crisis, or a mental health challenge was triggered due to some type of grief, whether it was a divorce, or, you know, a breakup, or, you know, a change in relationships, whatever it may be, that the shock to the system caused a mental health crisis. And so just like, you know, with anything else, you know, you want to get it addressed. You don't want it to let it linger, because it can impact the way you live your life.
And so that being said, you're right, Janaea, you know, we need to stop looking at grieving as being a problem or a sickness or a disease or something, a weakness.
Or ugly monster that we don't even want to deal with.
Right. And that is the purpose of Roberta's House, being a resource today, is so that we can inform and help people understand and give them the safe space to grieve and work through their grief. Because sometimes we recognize that sometimes family can be very difficult, and or not really understand, because everyone is comparing each other's grief. And that's something else that we want to talk about. People grieve differently.
Yes.
Children grieve just like adults, but their grief is different in the sense that because of their cognitive development and age, it varies from, say, preschool to school age to teens. But they experience many times the same regrets, the guilt. They self-blame just like we do. You know, they feel like, you know, mommy died because I said something or did something wrong. Children and teens grieve also. And so we need to also pay attention to the behaviors of children and teens. And we need to also have a conversation with them. And don't be afraid to ask them about the person who is no longer here, or, you know, or who's died. We need to say, you know, tell me what you're feeling. It's okay if you're angry, or it's okay if you feel sad. And sometimes you don't know what you're feeling, and that's okay too. But please come and talk to me. You know, that's what you would want to tell a young person. Please come and talk to me and tell me how you're feeling sometimes. And when you see them looking depressed or crying or whatever, you know, don't avoid those conversation times. We grieve differently by gender. You know, women have a tendency to be more intuitive type grievers. And what do I mean by that? That we can be emotional. We like to talk. We've been groomed that way and raised that way too. You know, we talk more. We may cry easily. We express ourselves, and we can become very overwhelmed in our grief. And men have a tendency, men, they say, are more instrumental with their grief, meaning that their experience is more physical, and they seek their information by doing tasks. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they may go out and play ball, or they may not want to talk about it. You know, they'd rather just go do something physical to work off that stress. um, and so men tend not to know what to do with us women oftentimes,
Right.
because we want to talk, we want, and they can't fix it, so they feel quite helpless. And then you have people who, what they call the dissonant type griever, who is, although they feel these strong feelings, that they hide them, um, because they don't want the public to think that they're weak or they're not strong. So people grieve in many different ways. Some people just aren't used to, we come from a history of African Americans too. What's said at home stays at home, or we just don't talk about our private, what
Mm-hmm.
goes on at home, our private information.
Right.
I do find that sometimes the more educated we are, the more difficulty we acknowledge or accept the grieving process, because again, that's that dissonant type personality, that they feel like they're strong, and I'm too intelligent to be grieving, or that's just a sign of weakness, which is so untrue and can be very, very unhealthy.
Yes.
And personality plays a big role on how people grieve too. Um, so, some people are introverts and some people are extroverts. So, all of these, and the type of death that someone experiences, or the attachment to the person plays a role. So many different factors determine how an individual will grieve the loss of someone, or the loss of anything. Also, what's really important is, some people have been through one crisis after another.
Yes.
Um, and especially now, with so many people experiencing multiple deaths,
Mm-hmm.
multiple losses, um,
And various
that
types of death.
and various types of deaths, and that
Mm-hmm.
can really complicate the grief process. And so we encourage you that, if you need help, don't fail to reach out for help. Seek mental health services. Call Roberta's house. Call the crisis hotline if you need that. So people grieve differently, and it's important for us to recognize that.
We have a comment from someone who wants us to share the 5 stages of grief. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, we are going to share with you by the end of this session the 6 tasks of grief and mourning. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Kubler-Ross. She actually wrote the stages of grief while she was in the dying process. And so she was not deceased at the time. And it really created a little of confusion and misunderstanding about those 5 stages of grief, which are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. One thing we've learned about these stages is that we as human beings don't fit in these little neat boxes of stages. So we don't use the phrase stages anymore. Stages seems to mean that we go in some particular order.
Right.
Grief is no order to it. It's messy. It's all over
Yes.
the
Very.
place. And those who are going through it will describe it as that. It's unpredictable. You know, it's rocky. It's unclear. It's marshy. It's stumbling blocks. It's, you know, curves and twists and turns. It's a roller coaster ride. And so we've moved away from the 5 stages of grief, um, because it doesn't quite fit everyone. Um, and there's no particular order. So we'll talk about uh, the 6 tasks, which is a little different theory where it tells you what you have to do in order to heal and
Mm-hmm.
work through your grief process. So thank
Mm-hmm.
you for asking that question, because unfortunately everybody just remembers Kubler-Ross.
Right. Right. Thank you so much, Annette, for sharing that. Um, that is definitely something that we learned in school. And unfortunately, at least just for what I've learned in school, we don't really talk a lot about grief. And so that's definitely something that, you know, I definitely think that we could do more on, because all of us experience it. And we talk about the five stages, and that's kind of where we leave it. So, you know, being for Roberta's House to be able to share these other theories that tend to be a little bit more helpful, and to shed light that, you know, the 5 stages wasn't about necessarily the grief that most of us deal with, but it's related to the process of dying. So thank you very much for sharing that. We want to talk a little bit about, you want to talk about the 6 tasks now, and then we end with the mourner's rites, or you want to talk about the mourner's rites first?
Sure.
We're already talking about it.
All right.
So
So
go ahead. Go ahead.
um, so the 6 task of mourning, and this is actually Dr. Alan Wolfelt's theory. There are quite a few other theorists out there too. There's also William Worden, um, Dr. William Worden, and these are both psychologists who have done a lot of research and study with both children's grief and adult griefs. And there are many others. There's like Therese Rando and others, and they all pretty much say the same thing. They just may have a change of a word or two in these tasks. But this is sort of like a prescription, you know, like if you were to go to the doctor and you were diagnosed with, say, diabetes, he would give you a plan as to how to take care of yourself, how to eat, exercise, you know, get your checkups every so often. So this is what we're going to describe here is also a plan for you to follow. Do you have this slide? Uh, or did I
Yes.
send it to you? Okay.
Yes.
So let's talk about the first one, which is a need to acknowledge the reality of the death.
And with this, truth is essential. Oh, do you want to go ahead?
No, I don't see the slide.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I
Can you
can put it
share
up.
that? Sure.
Yep, I can put it up. 1 second.
So I'll do the odd and you do the even. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, here we go. Can you see it now?
Oh no, not that one. Okay, I thought I sent you the slide. Maybe I didn't. Okay, so we can use this. This is fine. I put it on a PowerPoint for you. Did I not send you that?
I don't think I got that. I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize. Don't no apology. It's my fault. But we can do it this way. This is fine. So the need to acknowledge the reality of the death. So how do we do this? Acknowledgement, you notice I didn't say, it doesn't say to accept the reality of the death. they've sort of stopped using the word even acceptance, even though Kubler-Ross uses acceptance as the final stage of grief. But others seem to think that in the beginning, we first have to acknowledge that the death is real. And how do we do that? We do that by the funeral rituals. We do it by um, writing letters to our loved one, by telling the story over and over again. We do it by even wearing the t-shirt, or most people have some type of keepsake that they wear of their loved one or carry of their loved one. Um, we acknowledge the reality when we go back to those places that you may have traveled together with that person. um, you're constantly acknowledging the reality that the person is no longer here, and that's part of the pain and all of the, the death
Yes.
experience and the loss, because it's like these reminders that you're constantly um, you know having to contend with. Part of us wants to forget, part of us wants to pretend that the person is just away for a while,
Mhm.
or that they're going to come back. Part of us doesn't want to accept that change. And so reality has its way of bringing reminders back to us to say, hello, guess guess what? They're not here anymore. Even if it's the empty chair,
Right.
in the house, or the bedroom that's now empty. Those are all ways that we have to acknowledge the reality of the death, and it's painful. But you have to sort of just take little doses at a time.
And with the second task is about the need to approach the pain of the loss while being supported. And so, as Annette alluded to, acknowledging the reality of the death brings about pain. And this is a lot of times where we don't want to go. We don't want to cry. We don't want the heartbreak. We don't want to feel anything. And it's essential to go through this because, as we said before, a death is like a wound. It's like a physical wound, if we were cut or things like that. And just like with the cut, we need to clean it before we can, put ointment on it. We need to get all of that gunk out. We need to cry or scream or, whatever we need to do to feel that pain, to express that pain. And it's really, really important to be supported while you do that, to be around people, as we mentioned before, to be around people who are not going to judge you, to be around people who can accept the pain that you're giving out, and not take it personal, but just understand that this is what you just need to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, you know, it might not necessarily be tears. As Annette mentioned with men, it might not be tears, or they might not verbally express themselves, but it might be in other ways. They might, play sports, or they might, work on a car or something to that effect. But we just have to allow people to express themselves in their own way and not judge their experience because it's different from someone else's.
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't cry, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Um, you don't have to cry to grieve, so everybody is different.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it is vital to express that pain, to deal with that pain.
Mm-hmm. And some of the things you might do to deal with that pain, you might write a letter um, to either the one who has died or someone you're very angry with. If you're very angry about it,
Mhm.
um, you may need to take some deep breathing, do some meditation in order, because a lot of this pain leads to a lot of stress. And if you're having heart palpitations or migraine headaches, first go to the doctor to make sure that you're okay. And if he says you're just stressed, then that means you have to do some self care. That means that, meditating, deep breathing. And you know what you really need to do here, and many people don't take this time, is to set a time aside every day to grieve. What do I
Mm,
mean? What do I mean by that? Like, one gentleman said after his daughter died that he would get up an extra hour early every morning before he went to work to be quiet and grieve his daughter. And he would get all of his tears out and cry and mourn and weep, talk to his daughter, talk to God. He would spend that time before he went to work so that he could get through work,
right.
so that he could get through his work and then come back home. So it might be good that you set aside time each day to grieve and to mourn and not be afraid of that pain. You know, underneath, once you release all of that pain, you will begin to find meaning and thoughts and feelings of the joy that you shared together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So number three, anything else you want to add, Janine?
Nope.
Number three is the need to remember the person who died. So some people can be grieve very differently with this. Some people like to see the pictures.
Hmm.
Other people can't look at the pictures. And there's no right or wrong. You have to do it according to how you feel. But it's very important that you do remember. No one, I think, wants to forget about their loved one. I often say, what would it be like if someone that we were close to died and we had no memory and we just moved on?
Wow.
There would be no meaning to our relationships. There would be no identity that I would have, that I could be able to relate to someone who was very close to me. you
Hmm.
know it would be, I think, it would be awful. It would be absolutely awful if
Devastating. Yeah.
if right if we did not remember. And many of us have a fear, many people have a fear of forgetting.
Hmm.
And I always reassure them, no, you will never forget. And so if you need that reassurance, find a keepsake, find something special. Think about the gifts that they shared with you. And I'm not just talking about physical gifts or tangible gifts, but I'm talking about those spiritual gifts, or the emotional attachments, the things that, how they made you feel, um, what the gifts that they brought to you that might have been, was like maybe security, or
Hmm.
peace, or joy, or
Hmm.
love that you shared. Those are the things that you want to remember, um, and hold on to. So the need to remember is very important, because and that brings about some pain too, when we start missing them and longing to have them back again, which means that we're learning the value of these people in our lives, the value of what they meant to us is very, very important. And we realize in the end of all of this that nobody can replace them.
Not at all.
Nobody can replace them. And some people do try to replace people. Sometimes a spouse will lose another spouse and they quickly want to,
In
you
another
know,
relationship. Yeah.
get in another relationship, which can be very, very dangerous for the other person, as well as the mourner. So the need to remember is very significant. And think about this for a child too. In order for a child to grow up healthy and continue to develop, they need to remember the person who's died. So please don't ever avoid bringing up their name or not mentioning, their mom or dad's name, or don't think that if 10 years go by, they've forgotten either.
Mhm. Right.
Because young people, if they lost their parent at an early age, they're going to think about them at every birthday, every holiday, when they graduate from high school, when they get their first boyfriend or girlfriend, they're
Mhm.
going to remember mom or dad. And so please don't just think that, by mentioning their name, you're going to upset them or bring up some painful feelings. Young people need to remember, and they want to remember loved ones.
And they could be hurt when you don't,
Right.
that they may feel like you want them to forget that person or their relationship was not significant because you don't talk about them. So
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely something to be mindful of.
Mm-hmm.
And in the next need is to develop a new self identity. So remembering the person, it helps you to acknowledge the relationship that you had with that person. And now that they're no longer here, you have to figure out, well, who am I now that this person is not here?
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you were a spouse and you lost your spouse, well, now I'm single. So now what am I supposed to do now that I'm single? Or, if you lose a parent, okay, now I'm not this person's daughter anymore, but does that change who I am? So it's trying to understand who you are now and trying to figure that out. It's a process. It's a process. And some of these other things might come back up. Some of these other feelings, might come back up, and that's okay. That's definitely okay. But it's important to develop a new identity, your new normal. What am I going to
Mm-hmm.
do now that this person is not here? So that you can start to function again in life. Because some of these other areas can kind of paralyze you if you're not careful. And so you would definitely want to make sure, because we still have to work, we still have to eat, we still have to take care of the family and pay bills and all those types of things. And so we want to be careful to not let our grieving paralyze us in those areas where we could cause more harm. You don't want to get evicted or lose your job, that type of thing. And so it's important to figure out what you're going to do now. So if you lost a spouse and your spouse paid all the bills, now you have to figure out how to pay all the bills. um, or even with a child, if their parent has passed away and that parent used to tuck them in and read them a bedtime story, well, now who's going to read them a bedtime story? And so it's just a matter of just trying to figure out how these things are going to go, who's going to play those roles now. Sometimes people pick on roles, pick up tasks, sometimes they won't. So it's just a matter of trying to figure that out. And it's a process, and it's helpful again to have a support network to be able to help figure that out, because it's difficult to do that on your own.
Mm-hmm. That is so true. It can become paralyzing, Janaea, as you mentioned, and it can even become paralyzing not just to the individual but to the entire family. I often think about the movie Soul Food with Big Mama. When Big Mama died, the family fell apart,
Yeah.
and they were already kind of bickering and had their sort of fights anyway, which every family does. But when Big Mama died, boy, no one was talking to each other, and everybody was so hurt. Um, Yet at the same time, they were all dealing with their grief in their own way, and they had to find their new identity in the end. Now that Big Mama was gone,
Yeah.
and they all realized that the values that Big Mama brought to them, coming together, sticking together no matter what, having the family meals, um, looking after Unc,
Yeah. Yeah.
all of those things. They realized in the end that they had a job to carry on the legacy of Big Mama.
Hmm.
And so sometimes we have to go through that as families. So if your family is going through something and it seems like nobody's speaking to each other and everybody's angry, or, you just can't talk, just give it some time. Everyone needs time to grieve in their own space first and find their own new identity. So,
Yeah.
thank you. So, finding meaning in what has happened is also a very important part of task in the grieving process. Um, Death kind of shakes us up,
Yes.
and especially if it's sudden or violent death, we may not feel safe. We may have a lot of questions about life. We have a lot of questions about our beliefs. um, maybe who God is. Why have I had to go through all of this?
Hmm.
Why did my loved one die? um, it can be very, very lonely
Yeah.
in this space here. And but you have to sort of find a meaning that enables you to move forward and to continue to function, to continue your new identity or your new norm. um, Even people who have the most tragic deaths,
Hmm.
like someone who has been killed in a car accident or, homicide, you will find, or I oftentimes see, people do something good or positive to make meaning out of a death so that it does not seem senseless.
Right.
For instance, if someone died in a car accident, people work towards changing laws,
Hmm.
getting a stop sign put in a place where it should have been a long time ago,
Yeah.
or they start a nonprofit, um, or they have a charity day in honor of the person who has died, giving back in some form or fashion to others in need. People do all kinds of things to make meaning and purpose so that their loved ones did not die in vain.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's important for us as humans, um, to make, I think we have this special gift too, to make good out of everything, no matter what happens. And it's for our own well being and for our growth and our sanity.
Hmm.
So finding meaning in what has happened, and it needs to be a positive meaning,
Yeah.
in order for us to grow. We can find a whole lot of negative meanings and things, but I don't think that we're meant to dwell on those negative meanings. It's meant for us to find the good in something and move forward with it.
And it might not necessarily be, you know, like starting a foundation, but just coming to peace with what
Yes.
happened. So my dad died suddenly, but I realized he was sick and now he's not sick anymore. You know what I mean? And so I would rather him not be here than have to go through a prolonged illness. And
Hmm.
that was me making meaning of the situation because I wouldn't want anybody in my family to be sick, let
Hmm.
alone my dad. And so, even though his death rocked my whole world, just knowing that he's not in pain anymore, he's not sick anymore, it gives me peace.
Hmm.
It helps me to have meaning surrounding his death.
Hmm. That's a perfect example. Thank you for sharing that, Janaea.
Thank you for
Absolutely.
listening. Lastly, is experiencing continued support in future years. Again, we can't stress how important it is to have a support network. It might not necessarily be blood relatives. It could be, your Roberta's house group mates. It could be a therapist. It could be, a mentor. It could be anyone. But just having someone that you can call to say, I'm having a rough day today. Father's Day this year hit me really hard today, hit me hard this year. So, having certain people in my family that I can call to say, hey, I'm having a hard day, you know, and just having those people who know me, and know that I'm just dealing with that. I'm not, falling apart, but I'm just having a bad day. So just having someone that you can go to, that you can call, that, you know, you can send a text to just to say, hey, I'm not doing good, or, you know, hey, I just need to talk, or you have any funny stories? You know, that's one thing I love. I love talking about all the funny things that my dad used to do. So my brother and my sister and I, you know, my other family members, we always talk about all of the funny things that my dad used to do. And the laughter really helps to not think so much about that he's not here, but just remembering the good times. So just having that support system is essential to go through and be able to move through grief in a healing way.
Absolutely. That's and remember the children, please.
Yes.
Yeah, they don't they need ongoing support no matter how much they grow older in life. They need that support. And also, please give yourself permission to have those days, like you mentioned, setbacks, grief attacks on holidays and special days and birthdays. And it doesn't mean that, you know, you're going backwards or you're failing or you're not doing well anymore. It just means that you're remembering and you still love. And I think that as long as we live, we will remember these people who have been a part of our existence and our lives. And um, remembering is, you know, I say love is eternal.
Yes.
And so we will for eternally be connected to them in spirit. Um, so yeah, let's, you know, we remember them, we honor them, we love them, we think about them, we talk to them, um, we have wonderful memories to keep us going.
Yeah. So we want to share, as we conclude, we want to share the Mourner's Bill of Rights. Pull that up real quick.
And so I just want to say that these many people feel like they don't have a right to grieve and mourn, but we want you to know that you have a right.
Yes.
To grieve. You have a right to mourn. That's like saying you have a right to heal.
Yes.
You have a right to grow. You know, you have a right to live wholly and
you have the right
fully.
to feel the way you want to feel about the situation.
Right. Absolutely. And don't let anyone block your grief work and your task, you know. And I think that as long as you are not harming yourself or someone else, you have a right to feel all of these feelings and to talk about them.
Yeah.
And allow them
so
to
we'll
be.
just go through a few of them, and we can post this later so that you can see the complete list. But you have the right to ask for privacy. You have the right to ask for help. You have the right to say no, and no is a complete sentence, and you don't have to explain yourself. You have the right to cry or not cry. You have the right to be upset. You have the right to be supported. Absolutely. That is definitely something I think we struggle with in the Black community, is that we feel like we have to do everything on our own. And we feel like we have to be strong, but we have the right to be supported.
Absolutely. And so many Black women feel like they have to be the strong one in the family because others have looked to you for that strength and support. But you know what? When you're going through this grief, you need to let people know that you need someone to lean on, and
Right.
you're not the strong one all the time.
Absolutely. You have the right to feel a multitude of emotions or not. Unfortunately, people who might not grieve outwardly are judged often, you know, that they're not grieving, or that they don't have any feelings, or they're, you know, cold-hearted, or whatever the case may be. They're just dealing with their grief differently. Everybody grieves in one way, shape, or another, even if they're not necessarily realizing it. They're grieving. Their behavior may change, their thoughts may change. but just because it's not expressed outwardly doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. So that's definitely something we need to be mindful of, that we don't judge people based off of the way that they grieve. I have the right to be tolerant of my physical and emotional limits. We have to know when it's too much, and be okay with that, and be able to express to people, okay, I can't do this right now, come back later, or whatever the case may be. We have the right to experience unexpected bursts of grief. You might just be at work one day and just can't stop crying. It happens. You might get a Facebook reminder. Those Facebook reminders can be detrimental sometimes because they come out of nowhere. But you have the right to experience those things that are unexpected. You have the right to make use of healing rituals, including funerals. This is unfortunately something that children can be deprived of. We think that we're doing something to protect them by excluding them from funerals, but that can be so helpful in healing for them. So we really want to encourage people to allow children to attend funerals. It gives them that moment of closure as well. It's for the same for adults. They need that time for closure as well. You have the right to have fun. I can't tell you how many people I've heard say that they can't smile or laugh or ask, can they laugh, even though they're grieving. And I'm saying, well, why not? Who says you can't? You have the right to be joyful in spite of what you're going through, or what you've been through. I think it would be a disservice if you chose to be miserable or chose not to laugh as your new normal, so you definitely do have the right to have fun. You have the right to search for meaning in life and in death. You have the right to treasure memories. You have the right to be alone. That is definitely something that, again, we don't always appreciate. Sometimes people they see us sad and it bothers them. And so they're trying to do stuff to change your mood so it makes them feel better, but it's not helpful for you, and so sometimes you just have to let people know, hey, I just need to be alone, or let me have my moment. And the last right that we have listed here is giving time for the healing process. And again, that's the same thing I was just talking about, just having time to do and feel the way you want to feel, and do the things you want to do. That is
awesome.
that.
Awesome. I just want to make those who are listening aware that if you are in a crisis and need any help whatsoever, please call 211, the Maryland Crisis Hotline, and for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And suicide is real, everyone.
Yes.
Depression can happen at a very young age for a young adolescent or child. So please reach out for help. That number is 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. And please reach out if you need any help. And know that Roberta's House is here for you. If you need to talk, if we have a couple of programs going on for men who are grieving every Monday at 6 o'clock. We have, they're called the Mold. Men of
Loyalty and dignity.
Thank you. Loyalty and dignity.
I love it. I love it.
Yes. We also have a time of sharing adult support group that also takes place on Mondays evenings for adults who have experienced a loved one due to COVID-19 or any type of death right now. So you can also reach out 410-235-6633. That's Roberta's house number.
And we also
410.
have an office in Prince George's County.
Yes.
And that number is 301-880-5100. And we also have, well, we'll put this information in the comments just so that you have it as well. And we also have a 24-hour survivor support line. And that number is 1-844-227-3478. This has been a great conversation. I'm glad we were able to do this.
Yes, thank you so much, Janaea.
Thank you very much, Annette, for coming in at the last minute and pulling this together for us.
Absolutely.
So stay tuned, everyone. We are going to have more of these wonderful conversations throughout the month, and we'll be posting some of the information that we provided to you tonight. So stay tuned to our social media pages as well, and you'll be able to catch the recap of this on YouTube. So we want to draw attention to our YouTube page and Instagram. So awesome. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Be
Take
safe.
care of yourselves. Yes, be safe.
Keep your distance and wear your mask.
Yeah, and wash your hands.
And wash your hands.
All right, take care, everyone.
Good night.